Hey everyone, this is Kirk here again at Option Alpha. So I've decided that today is going to be the day that I actually stop all of my hexabots from running, which I know is actually probably a little bit of a shocker for some of you who do follow the hexabot strategy or some of our podcasts about them. But I want to walk through why I'm doing it here in today's video, how I kind of got to this decision myself as managing this bot portfolio, and then eventually what my plan is for either another version of the hexabots or to incorporate some of these things into the future EV strategy that we're kind of working with right now. So I got to tell you, first of all, this didn't come lightly. I've been thinking about this for quite some time. In fact, I've shared this with a couple of our team members. Because I'm actually doing the EV portfolio at the same time and doing this like EV experimental portfolio and some of the new stuff that we have, I've kind of been thinking, I don't really know if the hexabots are probably the best use of what I want to do now that we have other tools like EV and Alpha that we can use and find trade ideas actions inside of a bot. I think the hexabot originally was created to serve a certain purpose or serve a certain strategy or core idea inside my portfolio. And while I like the idea of doing the trend analysis and stuff like that, it was really complicated bot. It's actually been a bot that has a lot of decisions. It's not an easy bot to understand by any stretch. And so as a result, I've decided today to stop all my hexabots, close the positions I have, and start preparing to redeploy that capital in the EV portfolio. We've done a lot of testing on it already. We've published a lot of research on it. The time has come to actually start shifting that over. And so this is how I'm doing it. My portfolio, and again, what I've tried to do on this whole series on automated trading is just share my journey and share what I'm doing, share things that work, things that don't work, and kind of go through it. So today I want to go through the hexabots on my live account so you can see what ones worked, what ones didn't work, anything we can learn from this moving forward that we can then apply in future videos to other portfolios that we run. This will be really, really hopeful. I hope if you're watching this, you can give us a thumbs up or a comment. Let me know if this does help. Okay, so here's kind of the rundown. And again, I just use tags for all of these bots. So I know that these are the live bots that I have in my account that are tagged at for hexabots. Some are traded at different brokers. They're all live trades for these bots that have been running for quite some time. And so here's kind of the summary data. I guess you can see it all in one kind of snapshot of everything that kind of happened for these hexabots. The thing that I would say is that there have been, and this has been incredibly fascinating for me to watch personally, just watching this thing happen, but there have been bots that have been, and this is only the last 30 days, but we can dive into it, but it just proves the point here, just showing this. There have been bots that have just consistently crushed it. I mean, some of these bots have just done really, really well from the get-go. A lot of these bots just I would say a lot, but some of these bots have just done really well. So whatever the strategy setup was for those particular symbols like QQQ and EEM, etc., it just worked. It worked really well. Other ones did not do so well. The biggest turd in this whole collection of hexabots ended up being XOP. Now, some of them are have been a push. You can see like XLU right now is currently a push. IWM currently a push. Some of these ones that really didn't do anything. But the biggest turd on this one for sure was XOP. Had a huge move lower. Regardless, I would have thought the hexabot would have kind of repositioned the portfolio a little bit faster to do that, but kind of caught itself on some trades. And that was really only the one that kind of essentially blew up is XOP. XOP kind of, for me, blew up because it ran out of allocated capital to use for new trades. I didn't give it any more capital to get into new positions since it was a marginal ticker at best. And so for quite some time now, it's kind of just been sitting as a blown up, hexabot, and I don't want to give it any more capital. So that was really the only one that kind of, from the get-go just kind of didn't work out and eventually just ran out of capital trading and caused a 47% loss on that particular bot. What I think is interesting about this, and if you take this, I hope with the expectation with all of your trading that you should be diversifying across different tickers. If I just looked at this in a silo and just ran one hexabot on one ticker symbol like XOP, then you can make the argument and say, well, hexabots suck and they don't work, or auto trading sucks and doesn't work, but it's just in a silo. At the same time, you could look at it on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and you could look at, say, the QQQ bot that's run or the EEM bot and say, oh my God, this is the best thing that's ever happened and it's perfect. It's the perfect strategy. But that would be wrong also because it's not. It's just it worked out better for those tickers. I think the summation here that I get to is that if you look at the aggregate of all of these, that we did actually okay. We did well in a market that conceivably had a lot of volatility up and down. The market's been down generally. A lot of these ticker symbols didn't do so well if you traded the underlying symbols versus trading around them. So I'm okay with that. And I guess the question that I've continually asked myself is like, why am I stopping this? Like if it's working okay and it's doing what I want, I really haven't touched any of these, then why am I stopping it? And I think it's because there's better trading opportunities with EV and alpha now that we can do, where we can let data and decisions and just math make the decisions for us and ranking that we originally couldn't do with the actual hexabots themselves. Some of these hexabots, we'll just go to like a mid-tier one here, have been running for quite some time. So some of the original ones I started were May, June of 2022. So they've been running for a long time. You can see that sometimes they had quite the big ups and downs all the way across the board. Some went through expirations and assignments and holding positions. And we dealt with those just like we've done videos on some of those. So it hasn't been a lot that we've done, but we've definitely had our fair share of assignments. And, if you're doing a lot of positions on some of these have had, 90, 100, 200 positions. So you're going to have some assignments and some, things that you have to deal with along the way as you go through these. But generally, this is, kind of an example of potentially one that you've seen, kind of going through the motions here. So let's actually go start at the top, kind of dive into each of these. EEM was an absolute like rock star. I don't know why it was a rock star. It had a lot of positions, went through 116 positions, 94% win rate. It just got it right. I don't know what else to say on this, but it never really had significant like moves. It really just didn't. It just kind of mostly got it right for EEM. I don't think this was the same for all of them across the board, but for EEM, this was certainly the case. FXI was generally about the same. Lots of movement in FXI. Definitely some assignments in FXI, but generally had some pretty good metrics as well. Gold was kind of a basket case. Gold was our top performing one at some point. I think at one point, it was up like 23, 24%. And then it went through a huge drawdown because it was just repositioned totally bad for the big move that gold had. And then it just spent a lot of its time kind of fighting back from underwater. And it has, which has been good, but it hasn't really gotten to where it needed to go. And you can see profit factor on gold was, on GLD specifically, was 1.01. So we were just in the process of like, making a penny for a dollar put in, essentially, like $1 and a penny for a dollar put in. So it's not really great. Didn't really do as good on gold. And you can see it's kind of marginally a push on that one as well. IWM was quite the basket case, had been through a pretty significant drawdown, some pretty big drawdowns that it went through. And it mostly spent most of its time underwater. A couple little, bright spots here and there where it started to get it right. But I think that IWM generally was just a little bit harder to trade in and seemed to be all over the place. Profit factor was about 1, so you could just basically just push your money around back and forth. And that's what you saw with the total P&L with that one anyway. Ironically enough, QQQ ended up being one that was actually ended up doing pretty well. So let me just refresh here. Make sure we go to QQQ. So QQQ actually, when you think about like trading IWM and SPY and QQQ, et cetera, you would expect that you would see, the similar performance of IWM versus QQQ because they're highly related to one another. I know tech is different than IWM, which is small cap, but QQQ did significantly better. And so it was interesting to see that actually get added to the mix. We didn't add this one to the mix until a little bit later. So this one actually started in January because we had exposure to IWM. I wanted to get exposure to QQQ. So that could have been part of the problem too, is that we just added it later and it didn't have as much. We also added it when we connected here to TradeStation, so that was good to get another broker involved in some of these Hexabot trades. But QQQ has been a really good one. Again, it's just one of those ones that just the strategy worked really well for this ticker symbol and it ended up doing pretty well. It barely spent any time underwater, had a huge profit factor, lots of good positions. If you were considering keeping one of these Hexabots running, maybe you keep it on something like QQQ and EEM, etc. Okay, TLT was really fascinating. So TLT, and here's the story with this one, is like TLT, and I think this is really powerful, but I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. TLT has been running non-stop the entire time. So I've never turned off any of these Hexabots. I've never stopped them I talk about this all the time. I don't stop them for Fed days. I don't stop them for earnings. I don't stop them for any major announcement. I don't. I just let them run. If I need to make an adjustment to the system or to the bot, I make an adjustment to the system or to the bot. What is fascinating about TLT is that it basically stopped on July 20th. So on July 20th this year, even though it was running, it never added more positions. Now again, it means that it was still looking for positions, and many times it would come into an environment where it could have entered a position, but it didn't, and it hasn't since then, and it's run the entire time since then. So here's why this is so critical to me, because I think it's just such a difference maker in how I eventually came to the conclusion that I wanted to stop running these hexabots in favor of doing something different, maybe incorporating some of this stuff later into those bots for the EV portfolio. But at that time, we made a change to the actual bot itself where I started to incorporate, I think I did a video on this, but maybe I didn't, but inside of the hexabot, I put in an EV filter per contract of greater than 1. So once we had EV as something that we could check inside of a bot, I put in for all the positions, any position that the hexabot could have opened, whether it was a short put or short call or whatever, that it had to have positive expected value. Now in the case of TLT, it completely stopped trading. So it was any of the positions that it was meant to find, that it was like trying to look at, it didn't find that they had positive expected value after that change. And what that told me was that at that time, the positions I was telling the bot to get into weren't positions that it should have traded. So it stopped trading. It didn't make any trades. It's run the entire time. You can see it's running right now. Like today it's running. See, Hexabot scanner today. It's running. Every single time it's running, getting into trying to find positions, but they just don't have positive expected value. And so what that tells me is that, or what's cool about this to me is that it kept this bot from a massive drawdown that happened in bonds. I mean, bonds have just absolutely been annihilated. And TLT has been the prime culprit, essentially, just the relentless selling pressure that's happened in TLT. And even during that environment, the positions I told the bot to get into didn't have positive expected value. So it prohibited the bot from entering those positions because they didn't meet the criteria. And so essentially, that one thing right there saved this potential bot from potentially blowing itself up, maybe getting into positions that it shouldn't have gotten into. For sure, it would have gotten into positions that were put spreads because it was way oversold and it was RSI was super, super low. But TLT continued to move down, right? And we have seen the chart before of TLT where it's just, look, it's just continuing to move down. So it would have absolutely gotten into some put spread positions that just didn't pay enough to actually get into those positions. Now, a really important caveat here, and please listen to me on this because I know people are going to have questions on this on the video, is that I'm not using the trade ideas action inside of these hexabots. So that was the other thing, is I'm specifically telling it to open a very specific short call, long call, expiration, etc. I'm not using the trade ideas action, which is open-ended to some degree to say, look, find the best position, rank them by alpha, etc. I'm telling it to look for this specific position. So were there positions in TLT that probably had positive expected value during this time period? Of course there were positions, but I never was looking for those because in this hexabot, I'm specifically telling the bot to find this position in this market environment or that position in that market environment. So in the case of TLT though, it helped it. I mean, it literally potentially saved the bot from doing really stupid stuff like entering positions that didn't work in the face of potentially one of the biggest drawdowns that TLT has had in quite some time. So that probably was one of the things that really changed my mind here to say, okay, I need to redeploy capital, turn off these. I need to redeploy them to potentially something like the EV portfolio and start doing things like that, which can find positions in the best environment and really leverage more of the EV itself compared to what we were doing before. So, okay, so if I go back to the bots here, so you can see, click back through my bots, there we go. Okay, then the next one here is XLU. XLU was a little bit of a push, profit factor 1.07, didn't really do too much, lots of positions in XLE, but didn't really do too much. XLU was quite a bear. For the majority of the time that I traded XLU, and again, it's still on right now trading, the majority of the time, lots of positions, super high win rate, a couple key positions back in September, October that just got crushed and really took it to a pretty big drawdown. And it's fought its way back since then. So if you didn't have those, you might look at XLU and say XLU is a really good one, has done really well. But if you kind of missed that period, it didn't do well. But it has fought its way back and kind of fought its way back to par, you could say. But who knows when that next big drawdown will happen in this one. Oh, we just looked at XLU. Okay, XOP. So this one is the one that just got annihilated, that eventually I didn't, like, I'm not going to do anything to this one, add more capital to it, whatever. It just didn't work out in XOP. Numerous times from the very beginning, it started having some trouble. A couple times it would recover, and then it would go down into these deep valleys, and then it would recover, and then it just went down into a pretty deep valley at this last move in the summer here that just didn't recover from. And it just got to the point where it didn't have enough capital to actually get into new positions, and at that point it just stops, right? So it still runs, but it's got no capital. You can see the tags. It says don't have enough capital. It's waiting for me as a bot trader to potentially add more capital to it, but I haven't. I'm just letting it go. You can see I've just let it go for quite some time now once it started running out of capital. And it just didn't work out. So for XOP, it was not a good bot to trade on that particular ticker symbol. Okay, XRT looks like a basket case, and it is potentially a basket case because XRT is notorious for having super wide spreads in after hours. And so you get these really erratic movements that happen in after hours pricing all over the place for XRT. And so as a result, it's just a very sporadic one. If you go to the closed P&L, you can see the story of XRT was one of just nice, consistent movements up, and then it would get potentially lopsided on some trades and then get smashed. And you would go through just a big closing series of positions. It didn't happen every expiration. There was lots of expirations between these. So August, obviously, to December, January, February of the next year, right? You didn't have any of those big moves. But it would frequently go through some big drawdowns on some big moves, and then it would have to stair-step itself back up. And that's more or less what we expect in trading sometimes, especially if we're selling premium and we're doing so with generally high probabilities. So I think that was pretty interesting. I think, again, if you go to the total P&L, it looks a lot more EKG-ish, but at the end of the day, it was more or less of a push, okay? So those are all the positions that we've had in Hexabots. I haven't traded any other Hexabots that you don't see here. Those are all my live Hexabots that I've traded, good, bad, or indifferent. But I think the time has come now to turn these off and to reallocate the capital to other positions. Now, there's a lot of ways you can go about doing this. I'll show you a couple ways you can do this if you do decide to, turn off your Hexabots or start using something different, or just anytime you want to turn off a bot and start redeploying capital. There's a little bit of a process because if you have positions open like I do, you have to figure out how you're going to manage these positions. And so I'll kind of show you a couple different ways that you can do this, and then you can be the judge of how you want to do it moving forward. And then I'll show you how I'm going to do it for my positions moving forward. And let you go from there, and you can make your own decisions, okay? So the first thing that you can do is if you go into the bot itself, when you go into the settings, you can just simply remove your scanner automation. Now, this is a shared scanner automation that's inside of our library, used across lots and lots of bots. It is not going to hurt anything to just simply delete this scanner automation. If you do delete the scanner automation, then what you do is you're going to basically stop it from entering new positions. You're also going to stop it from doing any sort of tagging that you have in here, especially for Hexabots. So just make sure that if you did want to stop the scanner automation, that you just are aware it's going to stop all tagging that happens. So it's not going to retag itself every time that it runs the automation and checks market data, et cetera, et cetera. So you can do that. You can also, if you want to, go into the actual scanner itself, and you can disable scanning. There's a little section here that says, does the bot have the tag disabled scanning? And if it doesn't, it continues on. So you can basically disable it by just essentially tagging the bot itself. So if I wanted to do this, I could go down here and I could simply say scanning disabled. And if I could spell it right, I could say scanning disabled, and I could then tag it as scanning disabled. That would then, when the bot goes in here, it would see that scanning disabled tag is there and it can't continue moving forward. Okay, so lots of different ways that you can do this. If you do that and you take it off and you start removing all the tags, then all that's left is essentially the monitor automation, The monitor automation is going to go through its normal process for the Hexabot monitor to monitor all these different strikes and prices and things like that. And it's going to manage the whole position as we go through it, okay? In my case, what I'm going to be doing for a lot of these is just simply manually closing out these positions. I've made the determination that I want to get these Hexabots stopped so I can prepare the portfolio to start going into the automated trading with EV, purely doing that and start incorporating maybe some of the things that we're doing in Hexabot in there in the future. But in order to do that, I need to free up some capital, and I don't want to hold positions, in this case, for 52 more days. I know I'm cutting positions off early. To do that, some I'm going to take at a loss, some I'm going to take at a profit. Today, I'm generally up on positions, so it feels like a good day to take some of these when they're generally working in your direction. But you can also just go in here and simply just close these positions manually. And then once you close those positions manually, turn off your automations so they stop running because you don't want it to find any new positions moving forward. Now, in my case, I'm going to go through and do that. I'm going to turn off automations for all of my bots that I'm running for Hexabots. Just go through here and just manually close positions. So maybe we'll try this one right here. We'll try this EM Iron Condor. And we're going to close this one. The mid is 58. So what we'll do is we'll send pricing. Let's say we're willing to accept 50. We're willing to accept 59 on this. We're going to try fast, try a couple different prices, and let it start going through. Wow, it looks like the bid-ask spread's pretty tight. Okay, and then good. We're out at 59. So there you go. So I filled that position directly with the broker and just lost about $1 in slippage because I wanted to fill the trade, okay? So that position's off, and you can see I can still do that even with automations being off because I'm just still manually trading. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Automations can run or not, but you always have control over what you're doing. So I'll go through and just close all those positions in the Hexabots so they have all those positions closed and off the books, and then that way I can have kind of a clean slate moving forward with some of these positions, and definitely with the capital in my different trading accounts, so I can actually start doing more of the EV pure portfolio type stuff. Okay, one other thing I wanted to show you as we just kind of work through here too is that inside of the actual automations themselves, another reason why I'm deciding to stop doing the Hexabots and to start doing the EV portfolio instead. And I think it's important to say, it's not that they didn't generally work. They did generally work. You can still run them. I still could run them if I want. I just think there's a better alternative now. So that's what I'm doing. So if you like the Hexabot, you still use it. It generally has worked pretty well for me in the summation of trades. But I want to do something a little bit different. One of the things that has really intrigued me about this, and again, this is just the maturity of the platform and the things that the guys are developing, is that originally in the Hexabot, we had all of these different decisions and things that we would put in here that would encourage us to basically look for everything that is essentially in exit options now. I mean, you could basically look at most of the things inside of this massive Hexabot monitor, and you could essentially come to the conclusion that most of these are included in exit options now. So when I built the Hexabot originally, we didn't have exit options to do that. It was not really something that was out there. And so now the exit options are obviously more important, more prevalent. People use them more. I use them more on other positions and other bots. And with the ability to update exit options on the fly, you just don't need a monitor automation like this anymore. You really don't. You don't need a monitor automation that goes through different bid-ask spread levels and tries to minimize slippage. You can just use the slippage setting inside of exit options. And so you don't need that. You could use some things in here still, we might do this later with other monitors that we build out for the EV portfolio, but if the long strike is breached, maybe you do want to close the position. Okay, that's not in exit options because that's very specific set of circumstances that you would want, but you might want that in there. Stop losses, those are included in exit options, so you don't need those. If you want to do a trend reversal, you could, again, do that inside of a regular monitor automation. Reduce profit targets. This is a very easy one that we could set up later on, that if we're inside of a certain DTE, we just update our exit options to our reduced profit targets. So we don't need to build out another series of automations to check for those unless we want to. And so that's essentially what we're getting at is if you have reduced profit target 1, reduced profit target 2, you could easily update these in exit options with a couple of little quick decisions and automations. that essentially get to the same thing without all of the different automations running in here. So that was another big one, is essentially just trying to minimize the friction of creating lots and lots of decisions that we just don't need because we have better decisions using exit options and better technology to do that now. So we don't need that. The other thing that I think, and I'm just talking about like my thought process around this, if this helps out, but the other thing that I've thought about a lot with the EV portfolio in particular is that the EV portfolio, when you look at that particular portfolio, and here's the EV portfolio right now, even though it's paper trading and even though we're going to have some different results just because paper trading is not ever the same as live trading, what is so cool about the EV portfolio, I think, is that it doesn't care what the direction of the market is. It doesn't care that the market is in an uptrend, a downtrend, overbought, oversold. It doesn't matter. It's just finding the best mathematical trade ranked by alpha. And so it's incorporating all of these very simple things that we would have had to check for originally inside of the Hexabot with multiple decisions and multiple branches, like probability of profit, max loss per contract, mid price, expires before the next earnings, all of these things. We just don't have to do that. We could just fill out the simple trade idea recipe here and then put in our ranking for alpha. And then from there, we can do a lot with that, right? That's where we can find, okay, maybe there isn't a good trade, like in TLT, for example. To go back to that particular Hexabot, let me go here to TLT. TLT stopped trading because I was telling it to look for specific types of positions. And those specific positions didn't have positive EV. But that doesn't mean there couldn't have been other positions. Maybe there were I'm sure there were other positions that did have positive expected value, but it didn't find it because I wasn't using the new trade ideas action inside the bots. I was using the older, just like very simple find a position, which is fine. You can do that. You can still find positions, but you don't have the breadth of using, the new tools that we have built out. So that was another big component for me, is like on the monitor side, a lot of these things inside the Hexabot monitor are already incorporated in exit options, can be used in updating exit options a lot easier. Some things we'll probably consider keeping, and we'll go through this in other videos as we build out the EV portfolio bot. But things like managing for, assignment risk is really big and present on like my radar for starting the EV portfolio. Like, how do you manage around that assignment risk? You would do that with a monitor automation because it's very specific. So those types of things we might still include, but we just don't need all of the Hexabot monitor. The other thing is with the scanner, we're doing too much in the scanner, and we just don't need that because we can do more of the math-based approach with EV and ranking by alpha. And if we do that, we'll probably end up with a lot of the same or similar types of positions, probably find better positions than if we just gave the bots that we're trading specific types of positions that we wanted to get into. So for me, it was kind of like a two-pronged approach here on why I decided to cancel out of these Hexabots and to not completely kill the methodology or thought process around them, but more or less incorporate them into what we're going to eventually be doing, or what I'm going to eventually be doing with the EV portfolio. So that's where we're at today. So today I'm going to be going through closing out a lot of my Hexabot positions, just removing all of those positions from my account. That kind of gives me a clean slate, clean capital to start redeploying and start building out the EV portfolio, start really thinking about how we do those automations and those bots. Again, I'll continue to document that whole journey with you guys as we start to do that over the next week or two and start to see where we go with positions. So I hope this one was really helpful. I know this was a long one. If you have any questions, you can let me know in the comments section here, but give it a thumbs up, a like if you enjoyed this, and just kind of sharing the journey and the process. Love to know how your guys' Hexabots do, if you're going to continue with some of them, maybe turn some off, maybe run some. But for me, I'm going full steam ahead into the EV portfolio and starting to figure out how we can use some of that moving forward. So hopefully you enjoyed this. As always, if you have any questions, let me know. And until next time, happy trading.